Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to do a quick Bible study on Job chapter 2. And so let's jump into it. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. So, the first thing that stuck out at me was this recursion of the appearance before God with again there was a day. So Satan appears for a second time before God for an accounting. I think we're getting an increasingly robust picture of just how closely Satan and God work together here in the book of Job. I put this in air quotes because it is unclear if Satan even understands what he is doing. So it's not exactly a collaborative partnership, which some dualists might say. And then again, I wanted to bring our attention to this use of this phrase, sons of God. It seems that most readers are not inclined to interpret these sons of God as the fallen angels. But for me, in this context, that's how I read it. This sons of God phrase is important. It seems that all angels, be they fallen or not, are sons of God. Then there is Jesus, who is the only begotten Son of God. Further, mortals, if they have faith, appear to become spiritual sons and daughters of God in the New Testament. So there seem to be at least 3 or 4 categories of sons of God. We've got the angels, the fallen angels. Jesus is the only begotten Son of God, and sons and daughters of God in a spiritual sense, mortals. Okay. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. That should sound familiar. This is a near repetition of Job 1:7, where it reads, and the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. The differences are small. I could not really tell if they were significant. I'm sure someone has really split hairs on that. To me, it didn't seem like it was significant, but I'm open to other interpretations. They seem nearly identical. Okay. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast his integrity. Although thou movest me against him, to destroy him without cause. Well, this movest me against him phrase really jumped out at me. And I asked myself, can Satan really persuade God to allow this trial of God? Can Satan really persuade God to allow this trial of Job? And apparently others have jumped onto this. I'm going to quote from the Benson commentary. This and the rest of this representation respecting Satan's moving, that is, persuading and prevailing with God to bring or to suffer this his enemy to bring, these grievous calamities upon Job is not to be understood literally, as if God could be moved by any of his creatures, especially by Satan, to alter or depart from his own wise and holy purposes, which are all eternal and unchangeable, to gratify that evil spirit by granting his desires, but the design is simply to signify the devil's restless malice in promoting man's misery and God's permission of it for his own glory. All right, so God is, I guess, sort of being coy here. He's not really moved by Satan's schemes. But it raises an interesting question. I mean, this Benson is saying here, God's not moved by any creature. So this raises an interesting question about what's going on with prayer, but that's a whole other subject. All right, verse 4. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. I think I understood this. I just thought this phrase, skin for skin, was kind of unusual. In short, what Satan is saying, wait until I can hurt him personally, rather than just take away his possessions. Let's see what happens then. And then again, I guess I'll just read from the Benson commentary. And Satan in these words insinuates that severe bodily pain was much more grievous to the human nature and would be less patiently borne by Job than any outward calamities which did not affect his own person. It is as if he had said, how dear soever a man's goods or servants or children may be to him, yet still his own person is dearer. And seeing that Job is still under no pain of body and in no danger of losing his life, his constancy is not to be boasted of, nor is his holding fast his integrity amidst his losses, nor his patience under them an evidence of his sincere and generous piety. But these things are rather effects of mere self-love. He is content with the loss of his estate, and even of his children too, so long as he sleeps in a whole skin, as well pleased that thou wilt accept of these as a ransom in his stead. Okay. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So this inspired the question in me, does Satan get to fully prove his point if he cannot kill Job? In short, Satan couldn't kill Job, for God intended mercy upon him later. I'm assuming that Job would think his life is at risk, even though it is not. So the affliction allows Satan to experiment with his hypothesis freely. Something that's interesting, since I'm on a roll with this Benson commentary, Benson says Job is a type of Christ or prefigures Christ. So I think we have to ask what that means. Obviously, Job doesn't die and resurrect, which is what Christ does. And I guess he couldn't, right? This is an interesting question, like why couldn't God resurrect Job at that moment if he had allowed Satan to take his life? That's a big topic. We'll address that at some point. Or maybe we won't. It's not really relevant for this project at this very moment. The Benson commentary reads, But save his life, do not attempt to take that away, which I will not suffer thee to do. God had mercy in store for Job after this trial, and therefore he must survive it. And how much soever he may be afflicted, his life must be given him for a prey. If God did not chain up the roaring lion, how soon would he devour us? As far as he permits the wrath of Satan and wicked men to proceed against his people, he will make it turn to his own praise and theirs, and the remainder thereof he will restrain. Job, in being thus maligned and afflicted by Satan, was a type of Christ, whose heel that infernal serpent was permitted to bruise, to touch even his bone and his flesh, yea, and his life also. Because by dying he was to do what Job could not do, to destroy him that had the power of death. Okay. Right, so Job's not empowered to destroy Satan. That's interesting. That's why he's not Christ. There's lots of reasons why he's not Christ, but that's an interesting angle of it. Because Christ defeats death. Okay. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal. He sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. All right, this is cool. Well, not cool, but an interesting take. So according to Ellicott's commentary for English readers, Job's wife is giving him another trial, which is Super interesting. Almost as if those closest to us can be operated as Satan's puppets. The worst trial, this is the commentary, Ellicott's commentary. The worst trial of all is when those nearest to us, instead of strengthening our hand in God and confirming our faith, conspire to destroy it. Hadn't really thought about that as part of the trial in this biblical story. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept, and they rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So why did they not know him and knew him not? Well, it's pretty obvious right now, like from the Benson commentary, and knew him not, his countenance being so dreadfully changed and disfigured by ulcers. Well, they couldn't recognize him, right? Because he was not having a good time. Okay, and what is this? I thought this ritual, or this sprinkling dust upon their heads toward heaven, like this is not something we typically do in English. I don't have any problem with it. It's just interesting. The Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges, sprinkle dust upon their heads, that is, they threw dust upwards towards heaven, which fell upon their heads, the gesture intimating perhaps that they were laid in the dust by a calamity sent from heaven. Oh, that's pretty interesting. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. So here, the 7 days and 7 nights. Again, we have the number 7 appearing early in Job. First, we saw it in regards to the number of sons he had, and we talked about how numbers 7 and 3 are numbers of completion. Apparently, mourning for 7 days was customary. It would be interesting to know how 7 days of mourning completes a cycle or fulfills some societal duty. In the Barnes Notes on the Bible, had this to say, 7 days and 7 nights. 7 days was the usual time of mourning among the Orientals. Thus they made public lamentation for Jacob 7 days. Genesis 50:10. Thus on the death of Saul they fasted 7 days. 1 Samuel 31:13. So the author of the book of Ecclesiasticus says, 7 days do men mourn for him that is dead. That's Ecclesiasticus 22:12. So, why 7? For it's a complete number. Was there any reason beyond that? I think that I have not found a satisfying answer on that, but so it goes. Okay, I'll just keep chipping away at this.